Let's talk about the news. What do you say?
Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, June 16th, 2017. And once again, I am live on Facebook video as I record the podcast today. And that opens the opportunity for those of you watching on Facebook to call in and comment on my comments about the stories that I've selected for today's podcast. I always want to say toll-free number, but it's not actually toll-free. You're going to have to pay the freight to call in. But on the half hour, after I've gone through the stories that I think are most significant today and offered my commentary, I will invite you to call in and interact with me. And I always love it when people don't agree with your humble host. It's much better if we have an interaction on things that, maybe you take issue with one of my comments or one of my points of view. I certainly welcome dissent, critical comment, and people who just flat out disagree with me. Now, the lights are washing out the phone number there, but I hope you can see it, 415-455-0102. So, as we speak, Donald Trump has made a series of decisions, and he now owns the 16-and-a-half-year war in Afghanistan. It's his. Now, he's trying to say, the generals have the latitude to decide what the troop levels should be, and he's handed off the hot potato to Mad Dog Mattis, Jim Mattis, the retired general, who is now the Secretary of Defense. And Mattis has announced plans to add 4,000 American troops, mostly for training, in Afghanistan. This is a fool's errand. Number one, Obama surged the troop levels twice in Afghanistan, starting in 2009. They approached 100,000, and now we're down to under 10,000. And the idea that 4,000 more will suddenly train the untrainable Afghan military and national police, the idea that the warlords that we have empowered will stand down, the idea that the Taliban and some elements who align with the Islamic State will just pack up their guns and go to a cave somewhere, it's preposterous. And we're going to have 4,000 additional American targets for the Taliban, for Al-Qaeda, or for the kind of insider attacks that took 3 American lives and wounded a 4th just about a little over a week ago. And so I recognize that this is a face-saving gesture. Trump and Mattis believe that they must do something. But we're really just going to see more of the same. The slog will continue. And while I don't support the addition of tens of thousands of American troops, the idea that 4,000 is going to change the course of this long-running loss for America is pure fantasy. There's a great analytical piece from our friend Gareth Porter, the historian and author. It's published at Truth Out a couple of days ago, and the headline asks the question, why Afghanistan? Fighting a war for the war system itself. And he notes that we have been losing to the Taliban and other forces there for over 10 years. The real reason for the fundamental weakness of the U.S.-NATO war is the fact that the U.S. has empowered a rogues gallery of Afghan warlords whose militias have imposed a regime of chaos, violence, and oppression on the Afghan population, stealing, killing, and raping with utter impunity. And don't forget the official corruption of the government, because they have grabbed billions of dollars in U.S. money, in payoffs, in reconstruction projects that were never built, and the money diverted into the hands of the most powerful. And Porter writes, instead of forcing the warlords to give up their power or simply letting Afghan society determine the Taliban's fate, the U.S. helped its own warlord allies consolidate their power. We insisted on installing Hamid Karzai as the leader. He was certainly a very inconsistent ally of the United States, and he lined his own pockets, as did his brother, while he was running the country. And then we developed what is called the Afghan National Auxiliary Police. And we dropped billions of dollars on these warlords' militias. And this has not produced a better outcome. If anything, it has cemented in power the various turf-conscious warlords and leaders and their respective militias. So I encourage you to read Gareth Porter's piece. I think it's a very interesting analysis, and I refer to Afghanistan as the whatever war, because Americans checked out a long time ago. It's Afghanistan, whatever. More troops, less troops, drone strikes, work with Pakistan, work against Pakistan. It's just an endless cycle, and it simply leads to more death and destruction. Now to Washington, where the tweet storm continues from the orange guy in the White House. And I want to begin by noting that the last few days we've had some pretty sensational leaks. And these leaks are coming from a new source, someone close to the special counsel investigation that is just being started up. It's a month old, by former FBI boss Robert Mueller III. And let me note the statement of the press spokesman for Mr. Mueller. His name is Peter Carr. He said Mueller's office has imposed stringent controls to prohibit unauthorized disclosures that deal severely with any member who engages in this conduct. But leaking in Washington is so widespread, so endemic, so reflexive, that we now know that about 12 very talented lawyers with special skills about money laundering, about Russian mobs, about appeals of executive privilege, Bob Mueller has assembled a really all-star cast for his investigation. And despite the threat to them not to leak, well, first we learned that Mueller has identified Trump as a person of interest. And it's fair to say that Trump is being investigated. In tweets yesterday and today, he has acknowledged it. Where did that come from? Well, the published reports cite anonymous, unnamed government officials. And this leak storm continues. The water levels around Trump appear to be up to his neck at times. And this is certainly an issue that is bedeviling the White House. And Trump's reflexive, compulsive reaction is to tweet away. So this morning, 87,000 people got his tweet. I am being investigated for firing FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. He is referring there to Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein signed the memo saying, get rid of Comey. It was pretextual. We know that the Russia investigation was the real reason. But Rosenstein was trotted out there to create this pretext, this cause of action, which we know is not real. And last night, perhaps in expectation of the Twitter brushback from the president, Rod Rosenstein issued an oddly worded statement. He wrote, Americans should exercise caution before accepting as true any stories attributed to anonymous officials, particularly when they do not identify the country, let alone the branch or agency of government with which the alleged sources supposedly are affiliated. So is he suggesting that the leaks are coming from British intelligence or Russian intelligence or name your intelligence agency, the Mossad in Israel? Well, the Washington Post, in reaction to that, updated its articles to identify the officials who remain unnamed as U.S. officials. The other thing Rosenstein said in his statement, Americans should be skeptical about anonymous allegations. The Department of Justice has a long-established policy to neither confirm nor deny such allegations. Now, I embrace that. We are dealing with a whole house of cards, and that's not to plug the Netflix series. A house of cards that could collapse at any moment, because there is no foundation of fact, of identified public sources who have provided the information that's been reported in the media. And so I do understand the pain that officials are feeling in Washington. Chloe, it's okay. They're just the leaf blowers here, and Chloe's in the studio, so you're going to hear her a little bit. Anyway, this was bizarre, and it raises the question about whether Trump or somebody at the White House got to Rosenstein and said, hey, these leaks are maddening, and you need to do something about it. But now Rosenstein is a target of Trump, along with Mueller, and he appears to delight in keeping them, off balance by threatening to fire them. And there is the issue that because Rosenstein wrote the pretextual memo supporting the sacking of James Comey as FBI director, that he may end up as a witness in the firing of Jim Comey. And in that case, he may have to recuse himself as the nominal leader of the element of the Justice Department running this investigation. So it does get deeper and deeper, murkier and murkier. My senior senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, issued a statement today about her concern that Trump may indeed try to fire Mueller and or Rosenstein. She stated, I'm growing increasingly concerned that the president will attempt to fire not only Bob Mueller, the special counsel, but also the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who appointed Mueller. The message the president is sending through his tweets is that he believes the rule of law doesn't apply to him and that anyone who thinks otherwise will be fired. That's undemocratic on its face and a blatant violation of the president's oath of office. First of all, the president has no authority to fire Mueller. That authority clearly lies with the Attorney General, or in this case, because the Attorney General has recused himself, it is Rosenstein, who testified under oath this week that he would not fire Mueller without good cause and that currently none exists. And second, says Feinstein, if the president thinks he can fire Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and replace him with someone who will shut down the investigation, he's in for a rude awakening. Even his staunchest supporters will balk at such a blatant effort to subvert the law. So that's pretty strong from an ordinarily cautious and quite conservative Dianne Feinstein. And now we learn that the president's private lawyer, whose name is Michael Cohen, and he is implicated in some of the contacts with the Russians and an allegation that he went to Prague for a secret meeting with Russians, which he denies. Nevertheless, Michael Cohen is lawyering up. Yes, the lawyer is hiring a lawyer. And so is Mike Pence, the vice president. He's hired a lawyer, and I guess his angle is he wants to keep his butt as clean as possible because he wants to be the survivor of whatever happens to Trump. Yes, he is a heartbeat away or an impeachment vote away from the commander-in-chief job. Now, the latest leak is about Jared Kushner, and this is from the Washington Post. Quote, according to U.S. officials familiar with the matter, but nobody gets named here. This is all still very much anonymous sourced. Anyway, the special counsel is investigating the finances and business dealings of Kushner, the president's son-in-law and advisor, as part of the investigation. They are looking not only into the meetings he held with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, but also with a Russian banker. And the speculation, it's only speculation, is that Kushner may have used his role as the president's son-in-law, the president-elect's son-in-law back in November and December, to try to leverage loans from Russians and Russian banks to help with their troubled $1.8 billion purchase of an office building on Fifth Avenue in New York. Now, again, that is simply speculation, but it is driven by the same kinds of anonymous leaks that are now a daily event, sometimes hourly, inside the Washington Beltway. If you're on Facebook, greetings. You're watching the Peter B. Collins podcast as we record it here on Friday afternoon. And if you're one of my viewers, I invite you to share this with your Facebook network to expand the audience, try to reach more people, and maybe we'll find some new listeners and viewers that way. Trump is in Miami today, where he is rolling back some of Obama's historic reopening policies with Cuba. This is pandering pure and simple. It's going to keep Marco Rubio in line. It has already. And he is pandering to the ultra-conservative Cuban-American community in Miami. And he's going to make it more difficult for us to travel to Cuba. And I'm personally bitter because I've been trying to organize a trip, and my partner Kathy put it off in April, and now it appears the only way we'll be able to go is with a group. That's one of the new restrictions they're putting into effect. And again, this is window dressing. This is a series of press releases. They're not changing the fundamentals. The embassy will remain open in Havana, and Trump is making sure that his rich buddies can still get their Cuban cigars. But it is a step backward and just another highly political move by Trump. A while back, I reported on a situation in Baltimore. It was really bizarre. After the Freddie Gray killing and the protests and riot conditions that occurred, we saw that a private contractor was hired, funded by a millionaire or billionaire who had a foundation, and the millionaire-billionaire is from Texas. And the private contractor was funded to fly Cessnas or other small planes over Baltimore on a daily basis with high-tech surveillance gear that comes out of the military. That includes stingrays and high-definition cameras. Now, some people say, well, at least it's not a drone. But in Miami, a group of activists has successfully blocked a plan by the police chief of Miami-Dade, Juan Perez, to fly a Cessna 10 or 12 hours a day over what is described as a high-crime area in North Miami. The usefulness of the proposed surveillance was at best dubious and at worst deeply offensive. According to a memo, the police plan to fly Cessnas armed with high-powered cameras over high-crime neighborhoods in the county. A grant from the Department of Justice for $1 million would cover the cost for roughly 10 hours each day. And the police department is blaming escalating crime in the area on Black Lives Matter. They're saying because of the increased scrutiny of police that fewer people are contacting the police with criminal reporting. So they want to use military-style tactics and daily surveillance to try to connect people with criminal behavior. And I consider this another form of pre-crime that works in the movies, but not so much in real life. Also in Miami, I want to credit a blogger named Dan Christensen. He runs FloridaBulldog.org, and he is on the hunt to force the release of information about the financing of 9/11 terrorists who were in Florida before September 11th, 2001. These are the same people who are subject of the missing 28 pages about Saudi Arabia's connections to 9/11, Saudi funding for the care and maintenance of hijackers, particularly in San Diego. That's the one we know about. There was this house with Saudis in it in Florida in this gated community. They disappeared and, left dinner on the table. And so Dan Christensen is pushing hard. And the FBI is asking a U.S. district judge in Miami to reconsider a May 16 ruling that would largely open for public inspection a 60-page FBI slideshow titled Overview of the 9/11 Investigation. Now, the FBI claims that some of this is sensitive because it would reveal details about how much money was being moved. Now, how can that be sensitive 16 years later? This is a cover-up, pure and simple. And I don't pretend to believe that I know the true story of the 9/11 conspiracy. But I do know that the official narrative is riddled with falsehoods, that the 9/11 Commission, which I watched myself, I went to Washington and covered their hearings, was a whitewash and a really sick joke on the Jersey girls, the survivors, who pushed for that investigation. And speaking of 9/11 truth, there's going to be more of the tinfoil hat bullshit thrown around after Sunday night's NBC broadcast of Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones. Now, I want to be clear that I don't believe the official story of 9/11, but I have never said that it was an inside job, that the government did it. I don't know that. As I said a moment ago, I know the official story doesn't hold up to close scrutiny. And I am willing to say that, even though I know I get marginalized. There are people who say, oh, he's another truther. But anyone with intellectual honesty who studies the record cannot buy into the official story. And when you see what it propelled, the Patriot Act, the wars, the expansion of the police state, the expansion of our imperialist adventures in Muslim territory, well, you've got to keep asking questions. And so I, for one, do not support the censorship of this Alex Jones interview with Megyn Kelly. And now it's getting really twisted because it appeared pretty cut and dry. Megyn Kelly was exploiting the notoriety of Alex Jones and his connections to Donald Trump to try to score big ratings on her new show on Sunday nights. She's on opposite 60 Minutes. It's not easy. Last week she was, well, maybe not last week, but the week before, her debut was in competition with the NBA Finals. So it's now hard to figure out who is exploiting whom, who is playing whom. And today, last night, Alex Jones announced that he taped his phone calls with Megyn Kelly when she seduced him into this interview. And he made a recording of the entire interview, which he says went on for 14 hours, from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. And he says that Megyn Kelly promised that she wouldn't take him out of context, but she has. That she told him, my goal is for your listeners on the left to say, wow, that's really interesting. It's not going to be some gotcha hit piece. I promise you that, said Megyn Kelly in this recording. Regarding the denial by Alex Jones of the Sandy Hook killings, that they were a hoax, he said, in hindsight, I think it probably did happen. I've had debates where I showed both sides. I believe people died there. Now, in his own divorce case, we saw testimony from Alex Jones' lawyers, actually argument from the lawyers, that he's just an actor, that this is just a routine, that he does whatever he does to draw attention and to get clicks and viewers. But Alex Jones did a Jim Comey on Megyn Kelly. He's got a recording of his interactions with her. And so, like I say, I don't believe that Alex Jones should be censored. I think that no one is required to watch it. And the best way to send NBC a message that you don't approve is to do just that. Don't watch it. The strongman leader of Turkey, whose name is Erdogan, he is pushing back because 12 of his security thugs were charged after their visit to Washington on May 16th, when Erdogan returned from the White House to the Turkish embassy, and video shows that shortly after he returned, he conferred with his top security guy, and then the guy talked into his earpiece, and these 12 people rushed the protesters who were nearby, kicking, roughing them up. It was really an ugly scene. And Erdogan says, well, look, if those bodyguards couldn't protect me, why am I bringing them with me to the United States? Well, this was not a defensive operation. It was offensive. And I'm glad to see that they've been charged. They'll never return to the United States, and so the story dies there in all likelihood. I'm going to open up the phone lines here in just a couple of minutes, and I invite you to call in and talk about the news. In particular, do you think Alex Jones' interview with Megyn Kelly should be broadcast on NBC Sunday? Let me know what you think. My number is 415-455-0102. There's nobody here to answer the phone, so when you call in, just let it ring, and I'll either pick it up and put you on hold or pick it up and take you right to the air. I got to lower this. You can't see it. 415-455-0102 is my number, so give me a call. Every day I pause to mention some of the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins podcast with your subscriptions. And I want to mention Mona Kobus, Anna Gordonier, Brian Mazzy, Kevin Beckley, Keith Hull. They're all monthly subscribers to the PBC podcast, and I'm grateful to you. If you'd like to become a subscriber, I'd love that. Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on menu, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. That takes you to the sign-up page. I want to add two other important causes if you are in a position to contribute. Roger Schuler is the intrepid journalist who has exposed the deep corruption in Alabama, including that related to Jeff Sessions, who was front and center this week playing Attorney General and, dealing with his amnesia. I don't recall, Senator. I can't recall. I don't know. And Roger Schuler lives week to week in a flea bag motel. And right now, he is scraping together enough pennies to pay the rent on Monday. If you can help out, go to legalschnauzer.blogspot.com and hit the PayPal button that is prominent there at the top of the page. Also, my good friend Tom Seaborn, the radio veteran from Eureka, who was responsible for supporting my syndicated radio show for, 6-7 years on KGOE in Eureka. He just moved to rehab today after spending over a week in intensive care. He had a serious accident that could have been fatal. He is recovering. He didn't suffer what we think are permanent spinal injuries, but he is in recovery mode, and there is a GoFundMe campaign to help cover his lost wages and cover some of the uninsured expenses of this medical event. So if you can help out, I've linked to Tom Seaborn's GoFundMe page in the show file for today's podcast at peterbcollins.com. And speaking of healthcare, the secret mean team meetings are expected to produce some sort of an Obamacare repeal and replacement by the end of the month. And Mitch McConnell hopes to get a vote before the July 4th recess. But even prominent Republicans don't know what's in the bill. Whether it is Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Orrin Hatch, who chairs a critical committee related to the budget aspects of this, it remains a mystery. And this is a very ugly episode, which we know will lead to pain and suffering for a lot of Americans who will lose their health insurance. And before you get your crocodile tears rolling for the insurance industry, I've got the figures right here. In 2016, the insurers did lose money on Obamacare, but the industry's profits increased 46% to $13 billion. This is criminal. This is a travesty. To see billions of dollars in profiteering based on health care. And this is at the root of our problem. Until we have single-payer health care in this country, we are going to be stuck with the profit margin of the insurance companies that will always take precedence over our need for critical health care. And the profits of the insurance companies are being driven by my fellow baby boomers. The real profit center is Medicare Advantage, where underwriting profitability soared by 279%. And that's the kind of business that is delivered to the insurance companies on a silver platter. And it's just incredibly shameful that this is going on. My phone number is 415-455-0102. You can be the first to get on the line here and engage me in conversation about the news stories that I'm sharing with you right now. And I've lost my piece of paper with the phone number on it. 415-455-0102. There was an interesting story on 60 Minutes last Sunday night. It defined the term brain hacking. And the interview subject is a former Google product manager who made millions selling his own startup to Google. His name is Tristan Harris. And he has serious questions about the long-term consequences of the addictive nature of digital devices. And he held up a smartphone and he said, this is a slot machine. And Anderson Cooper said, why? How is that a slot machine? He said, well, every time I check my phone, I'm playing the slot machine to see what did I get. This is one way to hijack people's minds and create a habit to form a habit. What you do is make it so when someone pulls a lever and sometimes they get a reward, an exciting reward. And it turns out that this design technique can be embedded inside all of these products. And so I compare the habit-forming nature of our digital devices, and I'm using mine right now to feed this Facebook Live video. I consider it to be similar to the way the tobacco industry spiked the level of nicotine in cigarettes. And it was the whistleblower Jeffrey, I can't think of his last name. Anyway, he brought that to our attention and exposed the lies of the tobacco industry. Well, the whole idea of app developers is to make an app as sticky as possible, to get you to spend as much time as possible with it. And this does lead to actual addictions. Here's the story of Marshall Carpenter. His father had to break down the barricaded door of his son's apartment and physically rip him away from his electronic devices because the 25-year-old could not bear to live a life that didn't involve hours upon hours of uninterrupted screen time. Now in rehab, Carpenter says, I was playing video games 14 or 15 hours a day. I had Netflix on a loop in the background, and any time there was the tiniest break, I would be playing a game on my phone or sending lonely texts to ex-girlfriends. Now, in the backyard of Microsoft's campus in Redmond, Washington, there is a rehab program called Restart Life. Over 150 guys and only 6 women have been through the program so far. And it requires that you get off the grid for as long as 6 months. The initial 45-day stay costs $25,000. I think that's more than drug or alcohol rehab. But in order to get you off the grid and really detox you from digital devices, that appears to be what is required. 415-455-0102 is my number. Give me a call. Let me know what is on your mind today, what news stories you have comments on. That number again is 415-455-0102. Now, you may know that Facebook has hired people who monitor posts on Facebook. I imagine that one of the reasons there was a delay in getting my Facebook feed up today is they're taking longer to vet the postings that people make. And so hang on the line here, please. And I'll get to your call here in just a moment. Thank you. So they have more than 1,000 people who are now monitoring posts on Facebook. They're looking for nudity, for hate speech, and for terrorist propaganda. And one of the offices is in Dublin, Ireland. And it turns out that due to a software glitch, the moderators who were monitoring the postings and the pages of people who were suspected of being terrorists were being revealed to the subjects that they were attempting to investigate. Now, this was accidental, but apparently when they would be watching, a certain page, their personal profiles were being sent to the people they were monitoring. And one Iraqi-born citizen of Ireland today, who's in his early 20s, fled Ireland and went into hiding after discovering that 7 individuals associated with a suspected terrorist group that he had banned from Facebook, an Egypt-based group that backed Hamas, had viewed his personal profile. So this is a remarkable security breach there at Facebook. And fortunately, it doesn't appear that anyone has been harmed by it. But the Iraqi Irishman that they described there did leave Ireland and went undercover because he feared for his life. All right, I've got a full switchboard of calls here, and I'm delighted by that. Let's go to the phones now and see who is on line 1. Howdy, you're on the Peter B. Collins podcast and Facebook Live video feed.
Peter, hi, it's Terry calling from Bakersfield.
Hello, Terry. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good to hear from you.
I am sorry that I've been out of the loop for a while and have missed a lot of your programs, but was delighted to see you on Facebook Live today.
Well, thank you.
And the first thing I wanted to say is that I think the name you were looking for before was Jeffrey Wygant.
Thank you. You are right.
Whistleblower, yeah.
You know what is also neat about the Facebook Live is that people can bail me out, and I just saw the comment that you posted by text here as you were speaking to me.
Oh, good.
So, you know, when I hit those memory lapses, people just bail me out. It's a wonderful thing. And I guess the other three people who were on hold here wanted to tell me the same thing because their calls have dropped.
Well, that's why we're here.
Well, Terry, can I expose who you are?
Sure, yeah, of course.
This is Terry Phillips, who is a longtime CBS radio newsman, and he is now living in luxury in Bakersfield, California, where it's about 190 degrees today.
It doesn't get any better than this. Hey, Peter, I wanted to ask you a question. Again, it's been a while since we've spoken, but of course I've been paying attention to the media attention given to allegations of Russian meddling in the American election last year, and I wondered whether you have thought that some of this, if not all of this, might be somewhat of a distraction, that we're focusing so much attention on these allegations and not even reporting them as allegations but facts without any public presentation of evidence, and therefore not spending that time and attention and resources focusing on all of the other actual problems that we have.
Well, Terry, you have made my day. And let me say that if you just go to peterbcollins.com and look at my recent podcasts, you'll see that I'm quite consistent and persistent in demanding evidence of the whole meme of Russia hacked the DNC, Russia hacked John Podesta's emails, Russia manipulated the election in favor of Trump, because this is all based on these airbrushed assessments. And we're told that the CIA had high confidence, but the NSA only had moderate confidence in the January 6th intelligence report that was insulting to anyone who had greater than an 8th grade education. Yeah. And so I want to be very clear, because some people have twisted my words. Some people have jumped to conclusions. You know, they'll see the headline for a podcast. They don't even read the text or bother to listen to my detailed commentary, but they just jump to conclusions. And one woman last week on Facebook asked if Peter B. is a Russian agent. And that is because I continue to demand evidence. I want to see these anonymous sources come out in daylight and say, oh, yeah, I'm the one who told the Post that there were 18 contacts between Trump officials and Russian intelligence. Not just somebody in Russia, but the claim is Russian intelligence. That is a leak that is still unsubstantiated. It's not tied to any individual, and it is unsubstantiated by any public evidence. And I'll point out that Trump, as he displayed with the Russian visitors to the Oval Office the day after Comey was fired, he has the latitude and the authority to declassify anything that he wants at any time. And so by now we could have seen the intercepts of Mike Flynn. We could have seen whatever the NSA collected on all of Ambassador Kislyak's contacts with Americans during any specified period of time. And one of the reasons I've been so stubborn about this, Terry, is that my high-level sources, and I continually invoke Bill Binney. Bill Binney is one of the highest-ranking NSA whistleblowers so far. He was the technical director. And Bill has told me 3 times since last August, when this stuff started to surface, that he does not believe that Russian agents or Russian actors were responsible for the hack of the DNC and the transfer of that information to WikiLeaks. And he believes that it was an insider leak. And that's why I don't just dismiss the Seth Rich murder case out of hand. I don't have any proof that Seth Rich was murdered for political reasons. I don't have any proof yet that he was the insider leaker. But it's a much more plausible story than the bullshit that we've been fed without any proof or attribution to date. And Terry, before I ask for your response, I just want to underscore for our listeners that you covered the Soviet Union and its ignominious end when you were a correspondent for CBS Radio. So you know a little bit about the history of Russian spying and also American spying on Russia.
Yes, I'll confess that I know a little bit more about this than our average fellow citizens. I am also dismayed that we seem, and we, not just Americans in general, but people in the news business, seem to be more outraged by the allegations of leaks or hackings or whatever the correct term is than we are about the content of that material that was revealed. And most especially, what troubles me is the evidence of misdeeds within the leadership of the DNC during the last election. Yes, of course, it's always bad when private communications are revealed, and especially if they're done in an unfair way. But where is the outrage over the rigging of the nomination of Hillary Clinton and the disenfranchisement, essentially, of supporters of other candidates? That, to me, is much more damning, much more troubling than any possible foreign intervention.
Well, Terry, let me suggest when you have a chance, listen to my recent interview with Susan Bordeaux. She is a feminist scholar and a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. She wrote the book called The Destruction of Hillary Clinton. And she waves away the content of the emails with a sentence or two in her book. And I confronted her on that in my interview, and she was really pissed. And she, wrote negative things about the interview on Facebook afterward. It was kind of comical in some ways. In any event, I pointed out to her one single memo that deserves great scrutiny. It came out of John Podesta's emails, and it was Doug Band's memo called Bill Clinton Incorporated. Doug Band was running the Clinton Foundation as well as a lobby shop called Teneo. And let me point out that Huma Abedin worked for the State Department, for the Clinton Foundation, and for Teneo simultaneously as she was booking people for special meetings with Hillary Clinton at the behest of Doug Band. And Doug Band's memo displayed all of the deals that he had negotiated for Bill Clinton. Going forward, $63 million worth of speaking and endorsement deals that would have occurred while Hillary was in the White House. And I mean, it now pales in comparison to the tawdry ethical standards of the Trump team and the graft and corruption that is so obvious there. But when you look at what Doug Band was bragging about, and he was basically saying, get Chelsea off my case, look what I've done for Bill. And that is pay to play. It does show that the foundation was a cesspool of money and political influence. And yet, Trump does tweet about some of that stuff, and I don't dismiss it entirely, but he's doing it like an angry little boy and not really attempting to address the serious underlying issues.
We do love to condemn corruption in other countries, but we have a blind spot, a huge blind spot, when it comes to the institutionalized corruption in our own country. Mm-hmm. And I do really wish that we would spend more time pointing fingers at the misdeeds. Yes, of course, what's going on now in Washington is a nightmare. It's beyond the circus that was reported in the run-up to the election. But it doesn't pardon the sins of others. And I really wish that we would spend some time getting past our corporate obligations as journalists, because we all, to some extent, are paid by, or almost all of us anyway, are paid by somebody to do the work we do.
Yeah.
But
Terry, hold on.
I think it's unacceptable.
Okay, hold on for 1 second here. I'm going to pick up this call and ask you to hold on line 2 there. And Terry, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one more thing. Have you been watching the Oliver Stone interview series with Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin?
I've seen the first 2 so far, and I feel both somewhat embarrassed and at the same time pleased by what Stone has done. Peter, as you know, I've done this kind of work. I hesitate to say reporting because, of course, Stone isn't a reporter, and some of what I've done goes beyond journalism. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that Stone has given Putin the opportunity to put his point of view on the record and essentially unfiltered. I'm a little dismayed that he's appeared to be such an apologist. I think what he really is, and the camp I put myself in, is as someone who encourages what we used to call détente, that we should try to have better relations with each other. And of course, other journalists might press Putin a little harder, or maybe a lot harder, on some of what he said. But at the very least, I think it's worthwhile that he has given us so much insight into what this individual and the government he represents, the government he leads, has to say. It's been fascinating so far, and I'm looking forward to the next two parts.
Yeah, I've watched parts 2 and 3 so far. And, I agree with your criticism of Oliver Stone. He's got a big ego. He inserts himself too much. I do agree with much of his commentary that is critical of the United States. And I also am impressed with Putin's ability. None of this is being done with notes. He just sits there and talks. And he's not confrontational. He's not excessively emotional or grandstanding. He doesn't bullshit. He doesn't call names or demonize people. He just very deftly explains the Russian perspective. Now, I recognize that some of that is barely true. When he talks about the expanding democracy in the former Soviet Union, I'm not terribly persuaded. And also, I have acknowledged that many of his opponents come up dead, some of them behind a polonium cocktail, and I do not dismiss the complex nature of this figure named Putin. But when it comes to the dynamics with U.S.-Russian relations and his knowledge of the world scene, I'm very impressed by what he offers. And last night I watched episode 3, which is largely about Ukraine and Syria. And, again, I don't agree with every argument that he offers or every rationale, but he has a coherent worldview. He has a consistent set of policy positions, and his critique of NATO and the U.S. effort to use it to try to encircle Russia and its former satellite states from the USSR is very real. And I do understand, without defending, why Russia grabbed Crimea.
Well, Peter, if I may add one last thing before I let you go, I would encourage your listeners, if they're interested in learning more about the relations between the United States and Russia, and specifically with respect to Russia and Crimea, to take a look at a half-hour television program that I did that's available on Facebook. It's called International Focus. It was meant to be a series, but it's one part of a series, and it does look at how our relations have evolved over the last 2 centuries, where we are now, and where we might be going. Mm-hmm. I was very pleased with what we were able to get, my team and I, and I think it would be a worthwhile addition to anybody's lexicon on the Russia-America story.
Well, and I have actually viewed that hour-long program, and I thought it was very interesting, and I learned quite a bit from it. So I'll put a reference to that in the show file for today's podcast. Great. And encourage people to find it at Facebook. Terry, thanks for your call today. I'm really glad you checked in.
Thanks, Peter. Good talking to you, and great work. I'm always delighted to see what you do.
All right, thank you very much. I've got room for one more call. Here we are. We've got somebody on the line right now. Good afternoon. You're on the Peter B. Collins podcast and Facebook Live video feed.
Hey, Peter. This is Joe from the East Coast of Maryland.
Hi, Joe. Welcome.
You sometimes call me Q.
Uh-huh.
2 topics I want to mention today. Since the election, I don't think nearly enough attention has been paid to voter suppression. I mean, Trump won by about 22,000 votes in Wisconsin, and it's easy to imagine in a Scott Walker-led red state like Wisconsin that 100,000 people could have been blocked from voting.
Right.
And that could have swung the election. And the other thing...
Well, hold on. Don't jump to your next point. I think you're dead on. I believe that Republican voter suppression tactics, ranging from the suite of laws in North Carolina that essentially erased the registration edge of 30% that Democrats enjoyed, that is evidence. The interstate cross-check list exposed by Greg Palast, that was run by Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State of Kansas, a Koch brother-sponsored guy, was successful in keeping potentially millions of people who likely would have voted Democratic from voting. I was in Cincinnati on the Sunday before the election. The Secretary of State had restricted early voting to a single precinct in each county, regardless of the size. Ohio has 88 counties, and those with limited populations had one voting location, as did Cincinnati, which is, the metro there is 1.5 million. And on the early voting Sunday, people were waiting 4 hours in line in order to vote. And I followed the line to the very end, and I talked to some people who came up, and they said, I'm not going to vote. I can't vote on Tuesday, and I came here today, and I cannot spend 4 hours in line to vote. So there were successful tactics used. And the final example I'll offer is from the partial investigation and recount that Jill Stein commissioned in Michigan that showed that over 60,000 voters in Wayne County, that's Detroit, voted, but showed no vote for president whatsoever. And that suggests a scanner that was intentionally miscalibrated to avoid counting votes for the Democrat. And so the manipulation of the election process by Republicans, in my view, is much more likely to have tilted the election to Trump than anything that Russia did. And, Joe, I got to mention one other thing because you got me going here. And that is when we hear about fake news and Russia propaganda and the Twitter bots that were promoting all these things. Hey, Hillary Clinton had a massive information management program run by David Brock, a dark money super PAC called Correct the Record. And they were not only pumping out fake news and, hit pieces on Bernie Sanders and then hit pieces on Donald Trump, but they had trolls who were there monitoring Facebook and Twitter and going after people who would post or publish anything critical of their darling Hillary. And so that gets completely excised from any discussion of fake news and propaganda. And, we also know that the Trump campaign did similar things. I'm not, simply zeroing in on the Clinton side. But the idea that external forces had more influence than internal, I don't have any evidence to support that at this point, Joe.
I agree. The second point, that gerrymandering is such a big issue, and I support the drain the swamp, if you will, solution of eliminating districts. Have congressmen proportional representation and elected at large. So if 60% of the people of the state of Pennsylvania vote for Democrats, then 60% of the representatives are Democrats and 40% Republicans, and the top vote getter in each one. Like, I have a brain-dead teabagger congressman, and I just don't even want to pick up the phone and call his office because I know it'll fall on deaf ears. But if I could call a Democratic congressman in my state, I would do that.
I have never thought of that. Certainly, in Montana, we saw that the guy who decked the reporter before he won, he ran at large. There's only one congressional seat for the whole state of Montana. I'm not sure how well that would work in California because we really are 3 or 4 states. And, we've got the red zone in the Inland Empire. So I'm open to your idea there. It would require a constitutional amendment, and it would cure gerrymandering. I'd have to think it through, though, for other kind of unintended consequences.
Sure.
So, Joe,
all right, Peter.
You have the handle Quaker, right?
Orts.
Yeah, Quaker Orts.
Yeah.
Okay, now I've placed you. Thanks for your call today. Great to hear from you.
You too, sir. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to thank Joe and Terry for their phone calls. I really appreciate that. That's the reason I do the Facebook Live. I want to give listeners the opportunity to interact. It's the thing I miss most from doing live talk radio on a daily basis. And before I go, I just want to note that Amazon has made an offer to buy Whole Paycheck for $13 billion. And if this goes through, The source of groceries 10 years from now will be Walmart or Amazon. Also, Fox News has decided to drop the fair and balanced slogan. Big lies take a long time to die. And finally, I want to note, I spent 35 years in the commercial radio business, and it's something that I love. I was infected with the radio virus as a young boy, and I bitterly opposed Bill Clinton's 1996 deregulation that allowed Clear Channel and Cumulus and these other companies to buy up all these stations and consolidate the industry all across the country. They killed localism. They wiped out thousands of jobs for people like me, and yes, I'm bitter about it. And it's also led to talk radio being only conservative. There are very few liberals allowed on the commercial, particularly on the AM dial these days, and this is a result of Bill Clinton's consolidation. Well, now, under Ajit Pai, who is the new Republican chair of the FCC, there is loose talk in the industry about getting rid of all ownership regulations and allowing one company to own all of the radio stations in a city, including a city as big as San Francisco or New York. And this is dangerous and crazy, and it shows that we haven't learned a goddamn thing from the failed deregulation that led to consolidation and near monopoly conditions in the radio business. And it's also made radio virtually irrelevant. Audiences have deserted AM almost completely. The median age of the AM radio listener today is 67. The median age of an FM listener is in the 40 to 50 range. Young people don't use broadcast radio much at all. And it is, I believe, a direct result of the bad management, the homogenization of commercial radio due to the consolidation that was enabled by Bill Clinton's 1996 telecom reform law. Thanks for joining me for my extended news and comment podcast. Live video on Facebook today. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together?